We were here with Troy Dannen, the Nebraska athletic director, and I was telling Troy we don't always get into these big picture, what's changing in the world of college sports conversations, but when I saw you, I figured we have to do this because a year ago, this time, you were the athletic director at Tulane, living in a certain neighborhood of college sports.
Yep.
Then you get hired at Washington, and you've got, they've just decided to move to the Big Ten. You've got to deal with that transition. And oh, by the way, your football team goes to the national championship game, and your coach leaves. And then the Nebraska job opens, and now here you are.
It's been a year. It's been a year.
Yeah. What is your head spinning?
It's starting to settle down a little bit. And even if you go back a year, we were coming off at Tulane, coming off a Cotton Bowl win over USC.
Yes.
So
you haven't talked any trash here, have you?
No, I talked. I had a little trash at Washington when we went back to USC.
There you go.
But I've now swallowed that. So no bulletin board material now that I'm in the league. But no, I've seen a lot of things in the last year.
Well, and during this time of complete transformation of college sports, which how much has that changed? Like, just because you've seen it through 3 different prisms in the past year, does that change how you look at how things are changing with the House settlement, with revenue sharing, with all of the things that are coming down the pipe?
Well, sometimes your perspective is guided by where your feet are.
Right.
And so, how Tulane was going to be affected by all of this is different than even Washington. And I think Washington, Nebraska, even a little bit different. So, there's a part of this, and how do you advocate for the greater good of the whole?
Yeah.
And a part of it, like what's in the best interests of
your
University
school
of Nebraska.
Yeah.
And sometimes what gets us in a problem is we're all very provincial animals.
Right.
And when I'm thinking about Nebraska and Pat's thinking about Penn State and Ward's thinking about Michigan, we kind of get nowhere. And so at least as I'm speaking now, I kind of feel like I have a little better perspective because I can speak to the impacts on almost every segment of college athletics.
So as you're looking at this, I go back to your first press conference as the Nebraska AD, where you came out and said very strongly, hey, if you're not supporting NIL, if you're not understanding that this is a very important part of the ecosystem that we need to take care of, then you're behind. And it felt like you were trying to kind of give a wake-up call.
Yeah, sometimes we want to romanticize the past and quit worrying about the present. And what happened to, the romance 20 years from now, the romance of college athletics is going to be today. Right now, it's what happened.
It's whatever happened when you were 14 or whatever. Yeah.
That's exactly right. But what had to happen, the 5 national championships that Nebraska's won were won under a different model,
right?
In a different environment, a different era. And we're not chasing those 5 championships. We're chasing Michigan last year. We're chasing Ohio State. We're chasing Georgia. So what do you do to chase it? The world in college athletics is now evolved into X.
Yeah.
NIL. And it's going to evolve into revenue sharing next year.
Right. I was going to ask you, because that message, while timely, might not be so timely if you deliver it in 2026.
Well, and one of the things I felt we needed to do at Nebraska was get people comfortable in the fact that we're going to be compensating, whether it's through NIL or whether it's through revenue share or maybe down the line employment. We're going to be compensating. It doesn't make the game worse. It doesn't make it better. It doesn't mean you need to turn away from it. But so I'm going to need their support.
Yeah.
Now, today I needed an NIL. Next year I'm going to need a revenue sharing model.
Well, your chancellor didn't there's not a button where they can shock you if you use the E word. I heard the E word. So I just,
obviously the courts are going to decide that more than
right.
one individual, but you have to look around the corner of what might be next.
Yeah.
And while we're still trying to operationalize this revenue sharing model, there are a lot of court cases out there that could render it moot
right.
down the line as well. So how do we prepare ourselves for what that eventuality may be?
Now, you've always been somebody who was thinking about these things. And, a lot of it was at Tulane, and you were trying to figure out how to put Tulane in the best possible place. Now that you're at a place like Nebraska, where your voice is pretty loud in this environment, how much do you feel like you should advocate for what your vision of the future should be?
So I've got a lot of perspectives from the Transformation Constitution Committee time, and inside the Big Ten room, I think my role is to just talk not on behalf of Nebraska, Tulane, but to just talk about maybe devil's advocate. Here are the consequences of this. Here are the consequences of that, and make sure we discuss all of those areas. The one thing in college athletics right now, I think Charlie Baker's doing a great job. Charlie doesn't have a lot of power because of the structure of the governance model, but we're all looking out for each other.
Yeah.
Institutions are, leagues are, and the NCAA, who is charged to look out for the greater good, really doesn't even have that opportunity from a regulatory standpoint to do that. So I think, and it happens a lot in the Big Ten room, what is the greater good? Now, we want to put the Big Ten in the best possible position.
Yeah.
But the best possible position is not the Big Ten and nothing else existing.
Right.
So how does the model stay in place in some way, shape, or form?
So you were coming to the Big Ten one way or the other, whether you were Washington or at Nebraska. What was that period like of transition at Washington? What goes into a conference transition for an athletic director?
Well, I got to Washington about 30 days after the commitment to join this year. And so it was fast-tracked. USC and UCLA had a couple of years. Washington, Oregon had less than one. So really was trying to figure out the finances. But there was still a lot with the athletes. I met with every team, and now we're asking the athletes, instead of going to Cal and Stanford, you're going to go to Rutgers in Maryland. You're going to go across 4 time zones. You're going to take red eyes. It's going to be challenging. So the interesting thing, the athletes, so excited. And I thought there might be a little more hesitancy with the athletes for the travel, but there's new, right?
Yeah.
They're going to different time
new places, different people to compete against. Yeah.
Getting different exposure. And, sometime I think, and I saw this just in the short time I was at Washington, you do get a little out of sight and out of mind pretty quickly. And this is going to keep the West Coast schools in sight and in mind, where that hadn't happened. So there was a lot of financial planning for the transition. There's still, you have to have a production studio because of the Big Ten network. It didn't exist on campus because the Pac-12 schools used a central facility. So just little things like that a lot of things that had to happen and had to happen quickly.
Now, Nebraska, there are things that have to happen. I understand that Matt Rhule, the football coach, has given you a 17-item action list. How are we doing on that list, by the way?
It's that list happens almost every place. I kind of been making a point of it that first hour I was there, he said, these are the things we need to do to have success. And, I work for the coach. Coach didn't work for me. I work for the coach.
I'm glad you understand that. I don't know that most ADs do, but that is how it works in most places.
Well, and it's not from you have more authority, you make more money than I do. It is, the job of the AD is to put somebody in a position to succeed.
Right.
And you don't do this. I don't coach football. You don't do that by telling Matt Rhule how to coach or what to do. So, it was important to me to know what Matt thought, having been at Nebraska for a year. He's had great success. He's climbed the mountain. So what needs to happen here? It gave me a great head start.
Yeah.
And then, that list gets bigger. And then there's some things on that list. Matt, now, is this really going to help us win? But if you look at everything through a context, does it help us win?
Yeah.
And does it help put our kids in a good position?
Yeah.
Those lists are invaluable.
Well, we were talking about this before we started. I'm very interested in what happens at Nebraska, because it does feel like this is a year where the football program should take a nice step forward. And I've said since NIL became a thing that the player who helps Nebraska take that step, whoever it is, was Dylan Ryle, whoever. I hope it's like Nash Huntmarker. I like the big guys to get it. But that person is going to do so well in what you guys call real NIL. Like it feels like that state is just dying to have the next Nebraska star.
The level of care in the state and ownership in the state for Husker athletics, in some ways it's a different level of pressure because you're representing 1.9 million people.
Yeah.
They're all Huskers.
Yeah.
And they all own it and they all love it. They all care for it. I found this out. I do a weekly radio show. we do a 5-night-a-week radio show in the state of Nebraska that's broadcast through the entire state. I have a weekly show of my own. That just shows how much people care and want to hear from Nebraska athletics. So to your point, when good things happen, there are going to be a long list of people that are going to embrace those who make those good things happen.
And how do you adjust as revenue sharing comes down the pipe? How do you adjust the relationship with the collective, how all of that works?
Well, part of the collective was we need to get people comfortable, as I said, with giving money that's going to support the athletes. The collective is going to be in place, I think, when the revenue sharing model comes in. I don't know what form it's going to take,
right?
But there's going to be some role now that the collectives have been established. But for us, every time we've had a new expense item, we found a way to grow revenues.
Mm-hmm.
None of us have a $21 million surplus,
no.
So it's not a matter of
new college football playoff contract.
It's a year. It drags a year.
Okay, all right,
but it's still not that much.
Yeah.
So this is one of those times when at athletics we actually are going to have to manage the bottom line expenses.
Right.
And so there's going to be some hand wringing and tumult on campuses as we figure out how to provide for the top and we all tier sports, whether you want to say it or not, or it feels good or not. You all tier. Well, you're going to see it obviously in how the revenue sharing money is allocated to sports, and it's going to feel even more tiered.
And I'm sure you're prepared for the action items from your various coaches, not just Matt Rhule.
Well, yeah. And the great thing about coach, every coach is a type A personality.
Oh yeah.
And so
their team's the most important team, no matter what.
They are going to want to make sure that they're supported in the way that their other peers in the league are going to be supported.
Yeah.
And so some of those are going to be challenging discussions and awkward discussions, but part of it is you also have to lay out this is not a penalty, but this is the why. And this is how, the fact that we have money to the 21 million to share, 90%, 92% of that comes from football.
Yeah.
And so there's a preponderance of that money is going to get allocated to football, and we want all of our teams to win. But more importantly than that, all of the experiences of the athletes have to be good.
Yeah. Because you still want them coming.
I still want them coming. I still want them graduating, and I still want them to have a great experience while they're at Nebraska.
And the thing that's fascinating to me is it's not always football. You guys sold out your football stadium for a volleyball game. I mean, it feels like if you can create the right program, the right environment, the people will come. The fan base will find it.
It doesn't matter what it is in life. When things are an event, people want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
When it's just a game, we can.
But if your volleyball program hadn't been great for years and years and years, that's not something everybody's going to do.
That's exactly right. But it goes back to ownership. People care.
Yeah.
I would tell you, I think the volleyball players are bigger celebrities than the football athletes are.
I would agree that. Yeah.
In Nebraska, I've seen security with our volleyball team. When I got there, they said, here's what you get for tickets for football.
Rev sharing NIL deal. I don't know. Well, this might violate the employment things. Might be like a work study thing. Defensive linemen as security for the volleyball team.
There's always an opportunity.
We're all about synergy here, Troy.
And I think we found there's always a way to do about anything.
Yeah.
But when I got to Nebraska, they said, here are your football tickets, here are your basketball tickets, and you only get 4 volleyball tickets and don't ask for any more.
And you're the AD.
And so it told me right away what volleyball was.
Well, every school is its own unique ecosystem, but Nebraska feels like just a completely different place. And you worked a lot of places. You Northern Iowa, we mentioned Tulane, Washington. What makes Nebraska special?
Well, I think that ownership, I saw it from afar growing up in Iowa. I always thought, boy, that Nebraska, it's something different, you know.
And at that time, they are kings of the world in football.
I mean, I would read their newspaper and they would win 35-7 and be upset that they gave up 7 or
That's right.
Only scored 35. But it is their team. It is the state's team.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of places though where they don't have professional sports, but they don't have the ownership of the team. And I think those national championships and what Devaney and Coach Osborne did, and even what Frank did, it gave people a sense of this is mine. And people, I don't want to say live and die by it, but when people care enough about it, that it helps in their mind define their own
Yeah.
lives. There is something special about it. It doesn't happen every place in that way. And you can argue sometimes maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. I will tell you, there's nothing that beats a high give-it-arm factor. And Nebraska has not been to a bowl game in several years. And the stadium is
Still full. Still care.
396 consecutive sellouts.
Yep.
And people still care about it just the way they did yesterday. And I don't know if that'll happen tomorrow, right? And part of our job is to break that streak and get people to embrace success. But people just grew up owning the program as if it was their own.
Well, I got a good feeling you're breaking the streak this year, so we'll see.
We've got the right guy. Matt Rhule is a whale of a coach. He's done a good job of getting the program built. That list of 17. My guess he had his own list of about 117.
Yeah, I figured it was pared down a little bit.
Yeah, before I got to the 17. So he's done this before at places that I think were harder to do than at Nebraska. So I look forward to what lies ahead.
Thank you, Troy. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples On3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.